Hi, this is Ria Flanagan with the Happiness Playbook series, and I'm really excited today to bring two guests to you, two for the price of one, which is free because we are here to provide some tips and tools and education for our communities. So I'm really excited. Co-authors, Dr. Dean Sunseri and Hollykem Sunseri of the book Roadmap to the Soul, seasoned experts in compassion and inner peace and seasoned experts in guiding individuals, couples, and families towards healing and purpose. But rather than me read about them, I want them to tell you a little bit about them. What is very cool and interesting is that they're a couple and they work together and they treat couples. So we're going to learn more about them and what they do. And I'm just excited to have you here at the Happiness Hour, Mondays at 5. All right, you guys, tell us a little bit about you.
So we've been married 33 years, and we both met while we were on a pretty intensive healing journey in our own lives. We always say that she was coming out of the streets and I was coming out of the seminary. So it was a unique convergence, but we both were very committed to, at that time, our emotional, psychological, and spiritual growth. So as we met, we just were really hungry. We were hungry to learn to deal with the things and the struggles that we had. And it was in that we started to not only experience our own healing, but to start releasing that to the people around us that we felt called to serve.
Mhm. Yeah. I think too is our personal journey was so important that through that process, and I think our intention of our heart of what we wanted for ourselves, and then the ability to create something to help others.
And
So,
that is what this show is all about, right?
mm,
Is helping people help themselves, help others. And I was learning something right before we were recording, is that that you guys will do trauma work with couples together so that they can build compassion for one another as they're doing their work in front of each other, which is powerful. And I'd like to hear more about that process that you guys do.
Yeah, well, couples work is really I love couples work. I probably 70% of my
mm,
practice is couples. And what we discovered early on is that the cycles that we go through over and over again, that are repeated over and over again,
mm,
are rooted usually in some type of wound that hasn't been resolved. And if the wound is really a deep, deep wound, we call it trauma. And we find that the way to resolve that is really through compassion and love, right?
mm,
And so we create a space when a couple comes in, we create a space to where we actually have them do their own internal work. The greatest gift you can give to your marriage is to be committed to
mhm.
your own work and stop focusing on what she's doing,
Or
he's
not
doing,
doing.
or not doing, right? And so as they do that, we facilitate the individual to kind of work through whatever the hurt was and to do it in front of their partner. And then
Mhm,
we will facilitate the partner loving them through the wound. So, what do you see? How's it feel when you heard your spouse share that experience? And it's really amazing. It's in the compassion of that the wound begins to get resolved. And the second thing is it gives them deep insight into why they keep
yeah.
cycling through it over and over and over again. I remember, for example, there was one time I was going to a retreat at a monastery on a Friday
Mhm.
evening, and Hollykem asked me, she said, would you call me when you get to the retreat? Make sure you're there, all right?
And it's before cell phones.
And it was before cell phones. So I said, sure. And I got there, I saw some friends, we started talking. By the time I looked at my watch, it was late. I didn't want to wake her up. And I called Hollykem the next morning and she was hysterical. I
Mhm,
mean, it was really an overreaction to the
mhm.
situation, but she was really hysterical. And and I was just kind of hearing her out. But in my own mind, I was like, what's going on here? I'm going to a monastery, I'm not going to a strip bar on
Well,
Bourbon Street. I'm going to. So she went on to explain that when she was growing up after her
Mhm,
parents divorced, and many times her father said that he would come on a Friday
mhm,
night to pick her up.
mhm,
And she was telling me she would sit on the front porch with her suitcase waiting, and
mhm.
many a times that he wouldn't show up. And
And it
then
wa
he wouldn't call. And at that moment, I saw the symbol, right? The most significant man in her life is not following through on his word on a Friday night. And when I saw that, it's like it made everything made sense at that moment.
Mhm.
And to this day, and this has been 30 something years since that happened. Like if I give him my word on a Friday night, I'm going to follow through on it. Thursday, I might not, Saturday, but Friday night, I will. And what it was is that I understood and had compassion for her wound because she was able to articulate it.
Right.
If she wouldn't have been able to articulate it, then I would have been the demon husband that, never follows through. But she was able to articulate it. I had compassion, and it created a mark in me to where it has been different since that very day.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I mean is that because she did, in a sense, her work in front of me and I had compassion, it turned into something that I developed a sensitivity to. And she was able to experience healing from my side because I have been accountable since then.
That's powerful. I mean, a few things that you were saying there. I think first identifying if we're from 0 to hysterical, it's related to the past, right? It's historical. If we're hysterical, it's historical. So noticing that. And then, but also her doing her own work to identify that, to be able to explain it. And I do think it's so important, right? That both people are also, working on themselves, even, before couples and during too. Because you can't fix anyone, right? So if somebody shows up like, well, fix me, they've got to be willing to dig deep and do the work. So that and then just the compassion that was able to be shared is also, I imagine, healing.
Yeah.
It is healing. Well, and one of the things too is that if you don't do your own work, you're expecting the other person to fix what was broken. And at the altar, what I find is the perception is that me, I've told you about things in my life, so you're never going to do anything to hurt me or trigger me like that. So I'm going to hand you all my wounded, we call it the wounded child. I'm going to hand you my wounded child at the altar, and the goal is to make her happy. And you're going to hand me your wounded child, and I'm supposed to make your wounded child happy. And that is the biggest lie of marriage, is that no, it's my job to take care of my own wounds and love myself. And all I am doing at the altar is I've chosen you to hold my hand, be my number one person to hold my hand as I walk through loving myself. And, that gets really, messy when I think, oh God, now you've turned into them, those people. And so now you become my emotional enemy, and I have to be guarded by, away from you. I have to protect myself. And that creates distance. And then, you do that over and over and over again, and you're not close anymore. You don't want to be intimate. You don't want to share what's happening. And it creates much loneliness and many, many divorces.
One of the greatest insights that we learned, we actually talk a lot about it in our book, is that the wounded part of ourselves, it really changed everything when I finally understood this. Our wounds have no sense of time, and they think symbolically. So meaning that any wound that we've experienced doesn't know the difference between 30 years ago, 10 years ago, yesterday, and today. And certain symbols will trigger the wound. And so in the example I gave about Hollykem, it was the most significant man in my life is not following through. And so that symbol it could be our father, it could be me. And when that symbol was triggered, it all comes to the surface, but she doesn't know emotionally the difference between what was about then and what was about now, and how do you have a language to differentiate that. And so that's what we really try to help people differentiate. You mentioned historical is what is about the historical experience and what is about right now.
Yeah, and I see that a lot where there's really just the re-wounding, right? They're coming to therapy, couples therapy, because there's been this re-wounding from childhood because they haven't got the tools, and then they're trying to sort of solve it through each other, and that's not the way. And so, yes, you have some really, this book and the work you do is so important. And couples can be a mirror too, right? So it does bring it up. And I sort of say, a lot of people have this sort of happily ever after, like I'm going to find the perfect person and we're going to get married and have a family and I'm going to be healed. And that's just not real. I mean, you're going to have these, situations until you heal. That's really the truth.
Well, and I love what you said. It's like, that's the picture, right? I always say Cinderella found her Prince Charming, but we've never seen her come out the castle. So I'm a little worried about Cinderella still. So in that, if you're not being triggered, somebody's lying in the relationship. So then you're really in danger. It's like, I'm not going to do anything to trigger you. So that means I am going to step on, glass for you. And I'm going to be a liar, literally. And not that we're trying to trigger one another, but being triggered is the true opportunity to love myself for the wounds that didn't get enough love. So for me, healing is not about dealing with something like, I need to deal with this. I mean, I'm a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, and I have been sober for 41 years. I got sober at 22 years old. Yes, to God be the glory. And I have worked, and I come from a highly, highly dysfunctional systems, because my parents were divorced. So there's, two systems I'm trying to survive. And through that process, when I got sober, what I learned was that there were so many things in my life that, let's just say, I needed 100 pounds of love on this one wound. But for whatever reason, you can have the best parents in the world, but for whatever reason, maybe I only got 25% of that. Okay. So there's 75% of love that needs to go to that wound so it's not bleeding, right? It's like, and so what I've learned is there's some wounds in my life, like the death of my grandmother. I call her Mama. My Mama, it was the person that saw me and loved me and cared for me. But I only got to, because I lived 5 hours away from her after the divorce, I only got to be with her a little bit, every year. And I couldn't call, long distance cost, just all those things. So when my grandmother died when I was 41 years old, I gave myself 41 years to grieve her, a day for a day, because I felt like it would take 41 years to grieve her. So if I feel sad on any day about my mama, I allow myself and I love myself through it. And then I said, if 41 years didn't work and I still had it, I gave myself another 41. There's some things that will take us to when we cross over to eternity. Well, we're already in eternity, but to cross over to the other side, that's when it will be healed, because they say they have no tears, everything is joyful and peaceful. But if it takes that long, then it takes that long, that I need to love myself through that. Now, who I choose to hold my hand, helping me love myself, is my choice. But first, I have to be the one to start the deal.
That's so important what you just said, because I think there is this piece of, sometimes someone's in that regress, like they sometimes call it regression to almost like sometimes a baby state where they feel sort of no words, or they can't differentiate, and they're looking for that partner to be mom in that moment, and then the partner doesn't understand that, and so there's this missed sort of healing connection. I think I can see how bringing the two people together and helping them understand that, right, could be helpful. Where a lot of times if one of the people is sort of in that place, the other one might be reactive on top of that, because it's confusing when somebody's all of a sudden nonverbal and they're they're not making a lot of sense, unless you're a therapist, you understand what that is.
Exactly.
I think that's true, is having those techniques and tools. And I do a lot of inner child work, and I do like a workshop as well around that. But it's so important that do you guys do a lot of experiential work in your work?
Yeah, we do. A lot of what we do is give names to the different parts of ourselves. So it's actually it's kind of weird for people, but it's also very freeing, because we give a name for the wounded parts. And when they do regress, it's like I can think in terms of, okay, that's Bop, or that's the wounded part of me that is very young or may not even have a voice. And then we also give a name to our coping behaviors. So this is, whatever we want to give that name, and then who we really are. And so by dividing that up, we really find it's interesting is a lot of the experiential work is that we have individuals, when they're dealing with the situation, is to give voice to all of those parts. So if we use Hollykem for an example, when I didn't call her, a part of her was, I'm so sad, I'm being let down again, my dad doesn't love me, this and that. Protector part, whatever that response would be. And true self is, I'm an adult woman and my husband forgot to call me, kind of thing. But there's three different thoughts and three different reactions. And when you're able to articulate that and even language that to your partner, it becomes a language to be able to connect, as opposed to going to our corners and not knowing what hit us because we're reacting from that. So if I know that there's been one time when I asked Hollykem, I said she was working two jobs and working ungodly hours. And, I was like, you need to cut back on your hours, spend more time with me because, you're workaholic kind of thing. And it was my big confrontation. And then she came home one Friday. She said, I took the whole weekend off, all day Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we get to be together. And at that moment, the wounded part was like, oh my God, you're going to be smothered in control and you won't be able to do anything. The coping behavior was like, lie to her, tell her you got a golf game on Saturday. True self was excited, so all that's going on at once. And I'm the one who asked her to take time off, And so, but if I was able to articulate and say, look, a part of me felt scared and smothered that I wouldn't have any control of my weekend. And another part actually wanted to lie to you in order to create space. But I'm really happy you will be able to spend the weekend together. All of a sudden, if I'm able to language it according to the different parts, then she can hear that and she can work with that. Like, okay, if you need time, do, whatever. But just imagine if I can't language that and I'm reacting and I'm lying to her and I asked her to take time off. It makes no sense.
So confusing. Yeah, I do some IFS. So the parts work is so helpful, right? And I love that you're naming it, and then you're both having a similar, language, because that's if one person's talking in parts, and the other person's like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't know what you mean. Like, that doesn't help. But if you're working together, you have a similar language. It's very helpful. So I love this. And so were you always doing couples? Was there an evolution to couple work, or how did that work?
I think in the beginning, when this is because I'm dyslexic and ADD, this is when people were trying to explain to me what was happening, like, Hollykem, you got to love yourself and da da da. It was, I had different thoughts and feelings and beliefs. And so it's like, you need to, change that belief. Well, you can be in therapy for 75 years and never change a belief, right? But the difference, what I learned was that if I categorized my belief systems and I categorized my thoughts, just like if you're folding clothes, then all of a sudden you have a lot of clothes, right? Just like you have a lot of thoughts and feelings and beliefs. If you categorize them, it's a lot easier to get ready in the morning. So in that, it was like learning how to do that for myself, and then having your partner learn how to do that and categorize your thoughts, feelings, and beliefs, because it's very rare that all three parts of me believe the same thing. And so in that, it's like, if I, my protector, she never, the part of me that, has learned how to protect myself and cope with life in a negative way. It wasn't meant to be negative, but it was to keep me from being hurt again. She never wanted to be married again. I was married before and divorced. It was like, I ain't doing that. That's a trap. No.
Not going to feel feelings, because that
I feel hurt, get left, be abandoned, get have an affair on you. Who knows?
Want somebody again? Hell,
she don't need nobody, She's like, I got enough. I got Jesus. I don't need y'all. So then, my wounded child's like, she wants somebody to love her and take care of her. Okay. And so she's like, she was looking for Prince Charming, like Cinderella. Right. And then there's my true self. It's like, I want to be in a healthy, loving relationship. And then being married, it would be like, there would have to be a lot of things that would have to be in order for me to legalize all of that. So as I started to do that, instead of me speaking, I'll never want to get married. Well, you speak, you create a world, right? But if I don't know who's speaking in me, then I'm going to have a problem. So first, the thing was doing it yourself, but because we were the people doing this process, they would say, my neighbor's working with you. Can my husband and I come, or I'd have somebody in recovery, a couple of years sober, and I'm working with them, and their wives would come. So it was for who, when you work in recovery, you work with couples, you work with families, you work with individuals, you work with children, you work with everybody, because everybody gets devastated in addiction and in alcoholism. So for us, it was just, whoever came to the table was who we went for. So we never excluded anybody on any level of wounding. And you were talking about working with the inner child. What happened with us was, of course, we did all the John Bradshaw stuff, the inner child. We used to speak with him and speak with Terry Kellogg. He gave us an endorsement on our book, on our first and second print edition. And in that, for me, it was very difficult because, you have somebody for an hour or, not a long time. They would, when we would say inner child, they would go to a happy memory and a sad memory. Well, I'm trying to separate that. So that's when I came up with the wounded child versus the true self has the magical child. And then the protector is the part of us that we don't like, but it is in recovery, if you're a recovering addict, we get very, very hopeless at one part in our lives because we quit doing drugs, we quit doing alcohol, we quit doing nicotine, we quit doing overeating, we quit doing anorexia, we quit doing workaholism, working out, and then one day it's like, I'm hopeless.
What am I going to use? I can't use it.
Well, it's like I'm never going to get better. It never stops. This part of me keeps grabbing hold to things, and it's like I didn't deal with anything. I've been in therapy for 5 years. I've been in recovery, and you become very, very hopeless. So what this process does is I have one part of me that will want to gravitate and to things that are unhealthy. It could be healthy, but it would go to an unhealthy level. Working out's healthy, but if you're jogging and you got bad knees and you've broken your foot twice, you may need to go swimming. You know what I'm saying? But it's like it gets hooked in.
Excessive. It's like an intensity.
Yes. So it's like learning these parts on how they see the world. So now I only have one part to deal with that's destructive. I only have one part that's wounded. All the wounding's in there, but it's one part. And then I have my true self and who I really am. And that can only come out when these two parts get put to the side and they're loved. Then the truth starts to emerge of who God intended me to be.
The authentic self, I like to call it, right? Peel back those layers, right?
Yes.
And this is great languaging for that, and some, there's different methodologies and different ways, therapists use, but, there's something about that that's very clear. And I feel like you can kind of work with that. And so, yeah, it's so wonderful. Thank you for sharing about what you guys do and how others have maybe an understanding of some different ways. And now, is your book a workbook? Does it have sort of exercises in it that you use with your clients?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's written as a book, but we have in each chapter, we typically have exercises, we have question and answer, we have different things to do. So virtually it really is a workbook. When we first started working together, 3 decades ago, we would do an intensive experience of our book in a 3-day process. And it was extraordinary because people would it would take us 6 months to a year to do what would happen in that one weekend in therapy.
You understand, right?
So I noticed you're doing intensive stuff also. And then what we did was recently, with the advancement in the internet, we said, well, what would it look like to make that intensive program over a 3-month, 4-month period? And so we developed a whole curriculum that's based on the book. That's actually a 4-month process called Transform You. And it's really been extraordinary.
Yeah.
We've had couples come, and we've had individuals. One of our best testimonies was a guy, him and his wife.
Favorite.
My favorite.
That's his favorite.
He said after going through Transform You, he said, my fights have gone with my wife from 3 days to 30 seconds. So we're still having the fights, but they're just lasting this long.
30 seconds.
That's a great testimonial. Very cool. Yeah. I know since COVID and doing a lot more online, I did some like online workshops or recovery one, and then one which was more about like getting into your purpose and passion and intuition. But I love that as like a couple's 4-month period. And for some people, like I love the intensive work because you get to see such transformation, right, in that 3 days. But some people like really gravitate more like to like a processing it out over time. So I can really see how, having these different things you can do, maybe one person is ready for that intensive and somebody else really wants more of a 4-month approach to kind of integrate, process, have time to kind of sit with the information. And I always say after an intensive that you got this sort of intensive work in that's like 6 months of work, but you're still going to be processing it over the next 6 months, 3 to 6 months too, because it is a lot. And I love that you guys are doing that. Now, is that online? How do people find you or do that if they wanted to do that?
Yeah, the best way to find us, our website is ihaveavoice.com. And so there's the Transform You link on
Mhm.
that. There's a link to Amazon for our book, A Roadmap to the Soul, and all of our services. So that's the best way is ihaveavoice.com.
Okay.
That's our book, A Roadmap to the Soul. Yeah.
Well, is that, tell me about that.
Yeah, well, that can be found on Amazon, and the book is really it's our
Right.
process that we do, and so our whole Transform You is based on this,
Yeah.
expanding and going a lot deeper. And it's a book that we wrote what in the 90s, and
Yeah, 90. We wrote it in like 98 and self-published in 99, and we've been using this process since the early 90s. So this is, yeah. And one of the things about the Transform You is like it's a video. What we love, what I didn't know if it was going to be this good. It's kind of like freaked me out, like, ooh, because you do things in person for 30 years, 30 something years. But and then, even when you start doing Zoom and that kind of thing, and it was like, wow, this is really working. My clients are all in California. And then from there is like doing this. It's like a 20-minute video they get. It drops every week. And then they get two videos that are assignments, activations to go with that video. And then we also offer, and if you're a couple, what we want you to do is do them and then share your assignment with each other. So you're getting that intimacy. So it builds from A to Z. And we also offer 2 live coaching calls a week with the process. So you get that. And we encourage people to come at least once a week if they can, but we record them and you can watch the recording because we teach every Zoom call for about 10-15 minutes, a little lesson. And then you can process, ask questions, whatever. So it's been phenomenal because people have even finished the process and want to go through again. They're like, we want to stay on the platform and we want to go through again because now that they understand the language and they've integrated it in their head and they know it in their heart, they want to integrate it in their heart. So
we finally reached a year, and we have one lady, Kelly, and she started way back a year ago, but she's still on the process. She don't leave. She said, I think I might do this the rest of my life.
Makes sense because I do think that there is something about having the accountability of the community to like keep you going, and also rewiring the brain, takes time. The older we get, the harder it is to change, right? Because our brains get more set in their ways. And so there is a lot to be said about kind of continually doing something. I had a course, Living a Rise Up Mindset, that then became the book, Happiness is an Inside Job Playbook. And my clients are like, they're doing the book, but it was like, you already did the course, but they're like, yeah, but I need it again. Like, you don't need to go back and do those practices and be reminded and have accountability. So there is something about having the community, having that practice, right? The more we practice, the better we get. So that's
so good.
It's powerful. So good for you guys, just to move with the times and be adaptable and resilient in change. I think that's all we've all sort of had to figure that out, and it's important. It's important. And I know you just went to a wedding.
Yes, our son got married on Saturday, and it was beautiful. We did. Dean wouldn't marry him. He wanted his daddy to marry him, of course, because we're both ministers, and but we would not marry him unless he went through the course. Him and his fiance, Allie, and our son's name Moses. And so they went through the course, and he was like, "Mom, what was so good is Allie's had a little bit harder life than me, and I have much more compassion, and I need to be a little softer." Because he's hard on himself, right? And so, because you treat people the way you treat yourself. And when he was able to see that, it was like, well, that's everything, Bubby, that you can see her for all of who she is, and be able to love her through that. So, the wedding was beautiful. They had lots of people, and it was a real Louisiana wedding.
Wonderful, wonderful. Just to ask a little bit about so we had talked before about what you learn being adopting a child, and what you learn. I would love for our audience to hear and learn too, because people don't always understand the depth of what happens when you're adopting a child, that there's often some, break in attachment from the biological parents, and that there can be some trauma right at birth, that not everybody gets why that would happen. But as a,
Yeah.
understanding the brain, and attachment, we understand more now that's a thing. So can you share a little bit about what that was like and what you learned and what you would tell somebody else who's going through an adoption process?
Yeah, well, we know that trauma, it's not trauma that's the problem. It's what happens after the trauma that becomes the problem, whether a person is validated, whether they can debrief. And so we also knew that Moses, we adopted him at 3 months. We were able to go to Cambodia and pick him up. And so we also knew that it was, I think, 10 days after or 7 days after.
It was 4 days he left his mom.
He left his mom. There was a rupture in the relationship
Right.
with his mom, obviously, and was given to an orphanage. And so we learned really early on how important it was to always tell him the story
Right.
at an age that
Well-
he could understand, at the level that he could understand.
Right.
And to validate that rupture, but
Right.
also to honor that and how much we wanted him. And we also noticed that it was amazing how on the anniversary
Oh,
of
yeah.
every year of when he was going to the orphanage,
Right.
he would wake up in night terrors.
Yes.
Now Hollykem picked that up, and I didn't, and but I started to realize that's true.
Yeah.
And so we just learned to walk him through it. So it was a wound that was there, but he was able to really adjust and move through it, because we always told him the story.
Right.
We never hid that from him, and that
Right.
was an important part of his healing
Yeah.
process.
Well, your body, and as you know, has a 365. So your body remembers even if you don't. And so when, 4 days after he was born, on even his first birthday, he was just woke up screaming and screaming and screaming. And I mean, I did everything. And then I'm like, goodness, this is the day. So I just started telling him a story, and he's not even 1 year. Well, he's 1 year old. Yeah. In 4 days. And so I just started telling him his story, and he quit crying. So I have told him his story, and his story to me is that his mother loved him more than I ever could, because I would have died with him in Cambodia. I wouldn't have let him go, and she loved him enough to let him go. And so he's very, very loved, and he's very, very wanted. So that's the way he sees his world. However, at 25 years old, on this year in August, he had his birthday in the 4 day, and we mark out the calendar. And I would, he would hold on to me for 3 or 4 days, and then when he was little, and then when he went to school, he'd be fine. But when that day came, because they go to school early now, and so his birthday's in August, so I'd have to tell his teachers, and when he was real little, they would let me go to school and just kind of hang out, and because he would just be terrified. And then, as he got older, it's like, okay, this is your week, this is your day, and I'm fine, mom. But then he'd get it. He'd have anxiety. He wouldn't want to go. He was afraid. And so we just kept working through it. And then this year, it's like, if you want me to come home, because, we have 2 homes, and he's in one and we're in the other. And he goes, no, mom, I'm okay. And then he called, he said, mom, I was feeling really weird. And I said, well, you know what it is. He goes, yeah, mom, I talked to Allie about it, and we went and have dinner, and I just was weird. And I said, okay, this is it. So he knows for the rest of his life that week, 2 days before his birthday, and then, that on the 21st, 22nd, and down to the 25th, that from the 16th to the 25th, just mark that on your calendar. Don't make any major decisions, and know that there's going to be this heaviness on your heart. And, for that, I mean, Moses doesn't look like us. I mean, people say he does, but he doesn't. He's very dark. He looks Samoan. He's 5'5". My husband's 6 foot. But he's always said, I have 2 countries when he was a little boy, Cambodia and America. So it's always been a celebration to the point to where I say, oh, look at, because we don't have hardly any Cambodians where we live. We have a lot of Vietnamese people and Chinese, but not Cambodians. And so I say, oh, look, Moses, those are your people. Mom, not everybody's my people. So it's, we just celebrate where he comes from in his culture. Now, he is full-blown American. He's an American, and that's it. Like, he didn't want nothing Cambodian at his wedding, none of that. But because we're so into it, our curiosity kind of feeds his. So it's not like I'm trying to hide anything. It's like I'm not afraid of where he's from. I'm not afraid of anything about that. I celebrate it. So for him, he's not afraid.
Mm.
He's just, and he's ours, and if he would want to find his people, that would be fantastic. But we did DNA stuff, and he was not interested.
Our last name is Sunseri, which is Italian. And so when he graduated from high school, I said, well, as your graduation gift, we'll take you back to Cambodia and can visit your country.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't want to go to Cambodia. I want to go to Italy. We had to take him to Italy because,
love Italy. Love Italy.
I want to eat pasta.
I want to eat pasta.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, because you're his people.
Yes, it's right. And what's really precious is that on our YouTube channel, we interviewed him. And I mean, our son is very blunt, very honest. He's very kind, but he's very blunt. He's very bold. So we interviewed him what it was like to be adopted. And we have no idea what he's going to say, right? And it's very good. I mean, it's very good. Yeah. And, he grew up in South Louisiana, he's a Cambodian Billy Bob was what we call him. He's grew up in a small town. He didn't grow up in New Orleans. We lived about an hour away. And when we moved back, he didn't want to come here, so he just visits.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But he is very fun,
I mean, I think there's so much there for people. Have you found yourself working with other adoptive parents around the process of that with your experience? Has that fed into your work?
Periodically, we don't serve a lot of people that have, but we've on occasion had people come into our practice.
Yeah. And we'll have I had a client for a long time. She was adopted from Siberia, and Dean actually treated her mother, and then the parents got a divorce. And so I got to be with our sweet girl, and, and I'd get to always say, oh, Moses has that. And, and she's like, he does. And then she got to meet Moses. And so, and she's very American too. Like she went into the military, she wanted to serve. And that was just there was nothing her mother could do to get her not to serve. She tried everything. She's like, my only child. But there was nothing you were going to be able to do to get her not to serve. Her mother just had to, because she's so American. She so loves her country now, and she's not in denial that she's from Russia,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, we've had the opportunity when it's come to us, but because we talk about Moses all the time and, how much we adore him and love him, and well, and our parenting skills were really strict. So, we have that, people learn from that,
Yeah, from the modeling of it for sure. So yeah, I just really appreciate you sharing with us. I think a takeaway for me personally is just really hearing that you were always, maybe at different ages, but sharing his story with him, right? So there was never this betrayal or that you hid it or that it was, and I think I see a lot of, or I've seen a lot of clients that was always a huge sort of trauma markers. Then they told me at 12 that, and they're like, whoa, and it's my whole world. So I think that's really helpful for people to hear and to understand. And how do you do that? And, I think that learning and getting education around adopting is so important for, future adoptive parents to understand how do we support them and help them with the process. Yeah. And even having that time that you talked about, right? Where during the birthday, or that you really letting him know it's okay. It's okay if this is a hard time. It's okay that allow yourself that and give yourself that downtime. And I think just everybody can hear that, right? That we all have something that, you need to grieve that day, take the day off work. You know what, that's a day you don't push through it. Honor that part of yourself that needs to have quiet time and rest and whatever it is. So you guys, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to share? I know I don't want to go too over with you because I know, sorry, I had technical difficulties, guys. But yeah, is there anything else you want to share with the audience today? I know I try to tie it back to happiness, but I think there's so much happiness in what you guys have shared, right?
Yeah. Well, the more you know how to love a wound, the more you become happy. And the person that is wounded, and when when another person knows how to love you through that, then there is happiness between that position, because happiness for me is about dealing with what's happening.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when I'm not working, like I get really happy at the post office and everybody's like, you're so happy here. And it's because I don't like to run errands. So it's like, I'm happy because I'm there. Like because I'm dealing with what's happening, what's in front of me. So I was going to say too, a thought that came to me, it was that with clients, I had a lot of problems. A lot of clients had a lot of problems when they, like children, when they found out one of their parents had been married before. And they never shared that because there was no children. They never were connected. If the children always felt like they were being betrayed. One of the way, when you were saying that, I was thinking one of the ways that I did that, and me being a recovering drug addict and alcoholic, which my son has never seen because I didn't get my son till I was 39 years old. And I got sober at 22. So it's a long time, but it's still part of my life. So what I always did was, like, if we were watching TV, my son always wanted to know who was the bad guy. Who's the bad guy, mama? And I would say, and it would be like an alcoholic or something, you know, on the TV. And I said, oh, he's not a bad guy, Bubby. Mommy used to be like that. And even though he didn't understand that, I just said it. And then as he got older, he would ask questions. And with my first husband, let's say if I was talking about something, I'd say, yeah, when I used to live on Supercharged, and that's where I got married to Alan. And then one day he goes, who's Alan, Mom? And I said, oh, well, he's my first husband, and Mom got a divorce. And, you know, then he'd move on. So it was just, I just made it part of I added it in the conversation on a timeline. So as he got older, he would ask questions. And then one year, I think he was about 6, we were in the car and something ruminated with him about all of that. Like all the pieces came together. He said, Mom, why did you get a divorce from Alan Lennox? And you know, like he had his whole name, you know, and I said, well, he didn't love himself. And, you know, I said, but Mama didn't love herself either. And he got real quiet. And then he said, Daddy, do you love yourself? And he said, yes. He goes, I love myself, Mama. I said, well, I love myself. He said, well, we're not getting a divorce. And it was just, you see, it's just putting it in timelines. You put it in timelines.
Appropriate information too, right?
Like, that's right. Because they'll change the subject the minute it's too much for them.
Yeah.
And you just let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And then as life goes on, if there's an opportunity to put it in, you put it in. And then they'll put it together and ask questions because now they're putting the pieces together. It's never a secret.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it just never becomes a secret.
Yes, because that's where they end up getting hurt or hid this from me. And so that's really helpful for everybody out there too, because I think a lot of times what can happen is parents want to model this sort of idea of perfection. Like, you know, we had it all figured out and that's not helpful because the truth is we did it and it's okay because we were young too and we made mistakes and we can recover from them. And, you know, that's part of it too. So yeah, I really thank you so much for sharing everything that you did today. And you guys out there, seriously, check out the book, check out their course. Do you guys have times where, you know, different dates that people join the course?
They join anytime. Yeah.
Great. I love that because then you're not having to like launch it and there's like a whole thing. You can just kind of keep just keep sort of doing the calls and then whoever joins and then
yeah, the way it really works great is that, you know, somebody may have been in for a month, 2 months. And so the ones that come in just now, they really get the benefit from the dialogue. And so we check in on where are they in the process and any questions they have. And so it's a very fluid process. We didn't know it would work like that, but it works a lot better than if we just have a staggered group.
Because they're always using the language. Like I realized that that was my wounded child doing this. And so they're learning from their videos and their homeworks and their assignments. And then they hear people using it. And you use such picture words when you're describing it that the other people can see it. And then they're like, that is so helpful that, you know, and we can't always think of every question to answer. So this really helps because then they ask questions and then we can teach. And then that gets recorded. And then Dean uses those things to make videos so we can put them out on the YouTube channel so people are always getting new information.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, that's great. And just even for me, like as a course creator and doing workshops, it's like just hearing how everyone's doing different things. And it's like, and it's great because it gives other people different ways. A lot of people now, the word neurodivergent, right? Some people do a lot better online, right? They feel safe.
Yes.
We've really discovered the research that, sometimes that's better than being in a huge group of people where they get, maybe feel overwhelmed with a lot of people. So yeah, it has been a game changer. And so I'm glad you guys are doing some of that and what you're doing. So thank you guys again so much. And, I hope to see you again sometime, some way.
Yeah. Thank you, Ria, for your work and
Yes.
dedicating your life to help people heal and come out of trauma. So I really commend you on your work too.
Thank you so much. I think one of my favorite things with the book is actually meeting new people and like-minded people, and sort of being in that community for me. And these podcasts is just, let's help more people, because even as we collaborate, as we share together, it's often a deeper conversation than if you were just on a news show or somebody that doesn't also understand, the nature of psychology and all the things. I'm finding some of what's coming out in these podcasts is deep and meaningful for our audience and our community. So again, thank you so much. So absolutely check out Roadmap to the Soul, a practical guide to love, compassion, and inner peace. So these two and their course, and the online to find the course is, can you guys give it one more time?
Yeah, ihaveavoice.com. The web has everything. It also has a link to our YouTube channel. We have hundreds of videos.
Yeah, free, all free.
Free videos.
Yes. So I think I have those, so I can drop them in, and also you guys will get the links. So thank you again. Thank you everyone who tuned in, and we hope that this was helpful. Happiness Hour, 5 p.m. on Mondays. Come back and see us. Thanks again, you guys. I really appreciate you coming.